Alright guys, welcome back here. Now in this video here, we're going to be talking about functions. And functions are one of the things that I found really cool, and it saved me a lot of time once I really started learning how to use these properly here. So let's go ahead and make a new file. Call it functions.py here. So one of the ways that an instructor of mine kind of taught me when I was first starting off here is that we learned these commands before, right? We learned like num1, I'm not going to type it out, but num1 equals 4, and then we add, 4 to 5, and then we print that back to the console. Think of those commands like sentences. Functions are a little bit like paragraphs, so they're more or less blocks of code that you can reuse over and over again, okay? So first off here, I have a couple of notes here that I'm going to copy over, and I'm going to paste them right here just to make sure I go everything here. So first off, what is a function here? A function is a block of code from there. All right, so we'll just say something like block of code. All right, let's go ahead and define a function from here. So we're going to work on how to build a function right there. Number 2, how to build a function. So what we're going to do is we're going to say def, and we're going to call this, when we say meme, we're going to follow this by 2 parentheses here, followed by a colon. If I hit enter, just like before, you guys see this space right here, and that's good. That's what we want, okay? Now, within this function here, let's just do something simple. Let's just go ahead and print out a message to the console here. Let's say something like Chems is my favorite meme. Now, we built this function, but we didn't call it yet. So now the next step here is how to call this function. Well, the way that we call it here is I'm going to give myself a little space here. I'm just going to say meme, followed by 2 parentheses from there. Now, if I save this file here, and I go Python, and I type it properly, of course, Python, and I type a function here, and I run this here, you can see that this function gets called here. Now, if I was to remove this here, and I save it again here, and I run this file, you'll see that nothing happens here, because I only defined this function from here, I didn't call it, all right? So if I put that back here, whoops, if I put that back, meme, just like that there, and I save it once again, I can call this function again. Now, this is useful if you have a whole bunch of stuff going on here. Like right now, we're only doing one thing here, but if we're doing a whole bunch of different commands here, I can group this together in one function, and I can call that function as many times as I want. Right, save, and I run it back, just like that there. You can see that this gets printed every single time I call that function from here. So right now, it doesn't seem too important here, but as you guys get more advanced here, these blocks of code become more important, and it's easier to call a function from here, okay? I'm going to get rid of this. Let's leave 2 in there for right now, okay? I'm going to give myself a little room here. So that's how we call a function. Now, the next step here is arguments. I think it's spelled wrong. Arguments. There we go. Now, arguments or parameters here, basically they're passed in to this part right there, okay? Essentially what's happening here is, let's say a function needs some piece of information to run here. And we actually already did that with the print function from here. And the print function, even though we didn't define it, it's built into Python. And that's why we don't have to define it already here. Python already knows how to work that function here. But right now, it needs something to print to the console, right? It's saying like, oh yeah, I can print, but you got to tell me what you want me to print here. So I pass in some information to here, all right? Or I pass in a string to there, and that's what prints out to the console, okay? So very similar here. I'm going to go ahead and remove this here, and let's make a def meme 2. Parentheses, colon, and then give myself some space here. I'm going to say print, and I'm going to say, whoops, print, and I'm going to set this up here. Now what I'm going to do in between this here is I'm going to take in a meme. I'm going to say meme plus is my favorite meme. Meme. There we go. Cool. Now, if I call this function from here, I need to give it this information here. So it's basically saying, hey, I'm going to print out this to the console here, but we're giving it the option to define what we want right here. Now, what we'll do from here is similar to what we did above here. Now we're going to call this function from here, and we're going to give it some information to print out to the console, right? We're going to say we're going to print this out here, but you need to tell us what your favorite meme is. So why don't we do Doge this time here? And I'm going to save this here, and I'm going to run this back here, and now, whoops, taking 0 arguments, that one was given here. Save. Whoops, I'm sorry, meme 2. That's why I'm like, wait a minute, something's up here. Meme 2. And I save this here. And now you can see it takes in this information and it uses it as part of this function from here. I could also do something like, something like def multiply. And I could take in 2 numbers here. Say num1, comma, num2. And I'll say something like, whoops, I gotta put a colon there, print. And we'll simply say num1 times num2. I'll give myself a little space here, and I'll say multiply. Hope I spelled it right. Yep, multiply here. And I'll say something like 15, comma, 15. And again, if I save it here and I run this back here, it multiplies these two numbers together here, okay? So this function here takes in information, it does something with that information, and then it kind of does something with that, if that makes sense from there, okay? So it's kind of like saying, you know, again, with that print statement from here, I can print it to the console, I need to let me know what you want to print to the console. Or maybe your parents say, hey, I want you to run to the store and pick up some food. Like, okay, I can do that, but let me know what you want me to pick up at the store. Is it chicken? Is it rice? Is it bread? Let me know what you want, okay? That's essentially this from here. Now, there is something called default parameters here. Now, default parameters here, I'm going to make another one here. I'm going to say def, and we'll say something like greet user here. Now, if the user doesn't give a name here, maybe this function is called from a different file or something like that here, let's give it some default value here. So we'll say something like username, and we'll set this equal to something like, I don't know, Jim right here. Save, and we'll do print. We'll say something like welcome plus username. Now, if I call greet user and I don't give it any information, save, and I run this file here, we'll see that defaults back to this from here. If I give it information here and we say something like, we'll do user1, and I save and I run this back here, you'll see it now this information overwrites what was the default right there, okay? So hopefully that's making some sense there here. In here we have parameters that were taken in and we're using that information in the function here. Now there's also a way to return that information back, okay? So I'm going to give myself a little bit of room here. I'm going to call this return statements, and above here we'll say something like, you know, arguments. I spelled that wrong again. Arguments. So now we have, well, I'm sorry, we did default parameters, we did arguments here. When I copy this from here, copy that, and this is the default params from there, or parameters. Params is short for parameters, of course, here. Now we're talking about returns from here, okay? So again, I'm going to give myself a little bit of room here. I'm going to say something like def, and we'll say get current score. Parentheses from here, and then a colon. Now what we're going to say is we're going to say return something like the blue team is winning. All right? So in this case here, I don't give it information, but I expect it to give information back to me here. So maybe you can think of this like, I don't know, maybe if I walk up to you and say, hey, do you have the time? And you look me in the eyeball and you go, yes, I do have the time. And it's like, okay, well, can you give me the time? So that's kind of like a return statement here. You're doing something, but you're returning something back to whatever called this here. So what I'll do is I'll say something like result equals, and I'll say get current score, and save. And now if I print the result to the console here, print result, not return, result, save, and I run this file here, we'll see that we get this statement, which was stored in the result variable from there. So this function returns this thing from there, okay? I could also do it similar to what we did above when we multiplied numbers here. Why don't we say something like, copy this down here. We'll call this multiply 2. And then what we'll do instead of printing it right here, we're going to return num1 times num2. And then give myself a little space here. I'm going to print, and I'll say something like multiply 2. And 2 is just a second iteration, not necessarily we're multiplying the number 2 here. And we'll give something like 25, comma, 25 here, okay? So we're calling this function from here. We're giving some information, and then that information, I'll tell you what here, just to make it a little less confusing here, I won't do a print statement from here. I'll store it in the result variable. And that's fine because we can overwrite that right there. And then we'll print out result. So we're given 2 pieces of information, and that's returning that information back to us with the result here. And keep in mind here, you could do something with that information. You don't just have to print it to the screen, right? You could assign it to a player. You could upload that to a database. You know, one of the things that we do in one of my courses we work on here is we hash a password. So the user tries to log in here, they try to sign in here. We immediately hash their password, and then we compare it with a hash that's stored in a database from here. You could think of it like that. Let's go ahead and save this here. And let's go ahead and run this back here. So now we can see that 25 times 25 equals 625 from there. Okay, so let's return that information, and then we print the result. Now let's do one more here. We'll go back to this example from here, get current score here. We don't always have to save it in a variable first. We could just say get current score right away from there, okay? Run it back here, and you can see this works just the same as this did up here, right? This is the same as that, just a little shorthand, okay? So other than that, that's gonna be it for this video, guys. Functions are one of the things that at first I'm like, that's kind of weird. Why don't I just define variables above here? But this gets to be more and more useful. It makes your code more readable, especially as you start to build up more and more. And like I said before, keep in mind, this is very simple from here. But when you're doing different complex database calls and you're doing different things like, I don't know, maybe game development here, it's easier just to group all into a function here, and that way you can have these blocks of code kind of easier called and easier worked with from there. Okay. So other than that, guys, you guys did great in this video here. This is a lot of stuff coming out of you guys pretty quickly here, but you guys are doing great, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take it easy.